am atomic.
And this was the moment when all of Japan lost their fucking minds. Producers watching this reaction realized they had something truly special on their hands. This is the story how one man turned his ideals into the most popular anime in 2022. YouTube is a therapeutic art form, an art form I believe that's almost identical to making a novel, writing down thoughts and feelings for the world to judge. This is the direct thought process of how the creator made this anime. That man is Daisuke Aizawa, and if you can't tell, he's the creator behind this anime, The Eminence and Shadow. And by the time we're done, you're gonna know everything you need to know about the creation behind this anime. But before we start, I'm gonna ask for 1K likes on this video. What I'm about to say hasn't yet been uttered about this anime and its creation process. Also, let me know down in the comment section who your favorite waifu of the series is. Is it A for Alpha, B for Alexia, C for Claire, or D for Delta? And I'll throw in E for any of the other girls in the series. Lastly, subscribe if you haven't already. If you do, comment I subscribed. Do so and I'll make sure to reply back to your comment. Do you remember the show Love Chunibyo and Other Delusions? The show follows Yuta Togashi, a junior high student who suffers from a condition Japanese people like to call chubiyoi. This is the often edgy or pretentious behavior of early adolescence, the behavior where people want to stand out and have convinced themselves that they know some type of hidden knowledge the world doesn't, characterized as a sickness. Yes, it's a sickness in Japan. I wonder what they would call an American then. Funny enough, it sounds oddly similar to someone we already know, but who could that be? Yuta used to call himself Dark Flame Master. Wait, dark, and shadows are dark. Sid is Yuta, a really past version of the character. Yuta would further alienate himself from his classmates. Sounds very similar. Eventually he grew up and found his past behavior cringy, deciding to change and run away from his past. Yuta eventually grew out of this, while Sid is still Sid. Throughout a sit-down interview with the actual creator of Eminence and Shadow, on more than one occasion, he referenced himself and Sid as chubiyoi, thinking of his younger self as shallow, because Sid's only goal is to become more powerful. He doesn't care about anything else. Sid himself is Daisuke. Daisuke is Sid, a reimagined version of Yuta's younger self, given a chance to live out his delusions to the fullest. And boy, does he not waste it. To summarize the show, the first episode dives into heavy topics and how Sid reacts to them. Sid knows a crime is about to take place and isn't about to stop it. In this case, he violently kills under the guise of him doing the right thing to save the girl, but people forget he still lets the crime happen. Why? Because he wants to fight. In the first episode, Sid seeks to become the strongest around, but he fully recognizes his own limits, driving himself to insanity. Luckily for him, he's in an anime, and also lucky for him, Truck-kun is nearby, and as the strongest entity in Isekai, he grants him his wish, sending him to a new world. Sid is a monster. I've never seen such a masterful way of lying to women until this guy. He could convince them of anything, and they'd believe him. He's a lying, shallow piece of shit, and I love him for it. Sid knows he's the strongest around, but will pretend he's normal. Why? Because lying to people was fun. He doesn't do it for some bullshit reason because he hates the attention or some Clark Kent Spider-Man reasoning. With great power comes great responsibility bullshit. He knows the end results of showing off his power. They're gonna praise him or bother him further. He has more fun, quote unquote, being in the shadows and seeing their shocked and crushed faces as Shadow when he destroys them in combat. He has the option of seeing both sides of a person and then manipulating them into doing what he wants because it's more fun to him. To be honest, we'd call him generic if he just acted strong in public or overly dramatic when he doesn't decide to do so. Sid's daily activities are meant to be the comedic parts of the anime. Other characters get their ass kicked while Sid is giving an encyclopedia on how to get their ass kicked in 1,000 unique ways. Sid is mentally insane. He's perfectly fine with being tortured or beaten. It sounds fun to him. The reason he does this is because he doesn't want no one to outshine him while he's having fun. I fucks with that. Under Japanese law, this man has multiple mental disorders, but I want more shows like that. And don't get me started on the light novels. He's a villain. He's flat out a villain. How did the creator make the show? I like to think that he made the show back earlier than he can even say, around elementary school. To quote him, he says, "The beginning of my first work was when I published my own work on the novel submission site Shosetsuka Ninoro, or Let's Become Novelists. At the time, there was a huge number of works based on the theme of different world reincarnation, which had long boasted its dominance as a popular genre. Although there were many competing works, I decided to dare to write a work of my own. As a start, I was still exploring, but after I had written about 2 episodes of Eminence and Shadow, the idea including the element in the work where the characters' thought crossed paths came in mind, and I felt a sense of certainty rose. The thought of this could be good within me. I had never written a novel before, and I wasn't sure if I was capable of writing a proper novel, but at any rate, it looked like it might be interesting, so I decided to give it a try. That was how I felt at first. This was back in 2018. Daisuke is a novice in every sense of the word when it comes to anime, but he still dared to write a show in the most popular and saturated genre in all of Japanese anime. He writes how one thing he wanted to write about in his works was the expression of his own values that he's gained in life. In doing so, the surface of the work could be anything, not different world reincarnation, for example, but something like a shonen manga. I myself have been choosing what to value and what to discard from my own perspective in this world since I was in junior high school. And as I gradually became able to verbalize this, I've been able to delve deeper into this work. Though the show operates under the guise of isekai, the show takes on a more shonen format. Shows like Hunter x Hunter, Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, One Punch Man. True, Sid is quote-unquote a hero, but he's far from any typical protagonist. Sid is singularly focused in what he wants to do, but he's also the type of character to question his own place in the universe, even though from time to time he does give out his own adolescence philosophy on life. He still had a meaning behind saying what he said. He can give you a perspective of how he thinks and view things, which I can't say a lot of protagonists do. Even though it's isekai, I would say it draws more comparisons to a One Punch Man. Quote, "I love myself the exaggerations of the I'm too tough style. I hope readers enjoy it as much as I do." He then references his days playing Final Fantasy and how he likes Sephiroth, with him being an edgelord. Once I heard Final Fantasy and Sephiroth, I knew I loved this guy. He's made his characters so personal and realized the humor of making characters that way, cause that's the point. Sure, there's gonna be a time when things get serious, but it's not meant to fully be so serious. You're supposed to have fun. This man was happy about the anime's reception, but he also got sad about realizing he's now gonna have to share Sid with the rest of the world. The show formula follows an A-B plot structure. The plot is the sequence of events in which each event affects the next one through the principle of cause and effect. The subplot is a side story that exists within the main plot. The subplot is connected to the main story, but never overlaps it or overpowers it. Sid, in this case, is a bit of the subplot, while the girls are actually the real main plot. This is almost identical to Overlord and really One Punch Man, and how they like to structure some episodes from time to time. While he's on screen, yes, his actions don't control the story or guide what you see. Alpha is the one who controls all the plans and doesn't tell him anything, thinking that he already knows it and that they're following his plans. We all know that Sid is just gliding through the show until the main plot interacts with him, to the point that he has to take action. In reality, it's genius. Writing a show like this has a major upside. This is what keeps the girls interesting and has a layer of mystique around them, which is by design. Quote, "There is no deep meaning in this. There is a story that humans can memorize up to 7 at a moment's notice, and I thought it would be easy to remember because it's a lucky number. As for the individual characters of Shadow 7, it's as if I created unnecessary characters at each moment. Therefore, I did not create a detailed character set in advance on creating the work, but rather girls were born by chance and detailed setting was gradually solidified later on. This is a very free way of writing. To start, there's a reason why Alpha and Beta are the main girls in the first season. Alpha was the one controlling all the girls and having these plans in motion. Beta was introduced to show, hey, give Alexia and Rose some opportunity for character development and to see further use into the show. That's why they were the first 2 brought in. And as the show keeps going, they're gonna add in, say, more of the Shadow Garden here and there, but only if it's necessary. From the man's mouth, he says how the girls have no purpose already outside of Sid. This is perfect. Some of you might be upset thinking, well, don't you hate female characters and useless characters like Sakura and Araraka who don't do anything or add anything? It's perfect because of what it means in the future, writing-wise. He's a new author, and he hasn't yet wrote himself into a corner where he has to go a certain direction with the story, meaning none of the girls are being wrote down a path that's not good for the anime. Could the girls betray him in the future? I don't know, maybe. Will they sacrifice themselves like Piccolo at some point? I don't know, maybe. Will someone else from his past world be his antagonist or show up again? I don't know, maybe. Are any of the girls potential love interests? I don't know, maybe. Not important. The problem with shonen women is from the start of the show, their role in future has already been determined, which makes them empty because we can now describe them in one line, and then they get lost in time because people simply forget about their use in the show. Characters like Launch, Oolong, and the Ox King were written out of Dragon Ball Z because their purpose has already been served, and they had nothing going forward. But character like Chi-Chi got to stick around. Why? Because she's the wife of Goku. Even though that's a shame because at one point in time, she was one of the strongest human characters in Dragon Ball. I think it's easier to put the girls in Shadow Garden in the same position as the Floor Guardians and Overlord, because they more or less do the exact same thing. At times, they're around to move the plot, says editor Shimizu. The characters are created from the viewpoint of, it would be easier to move the story along if there was such a girl in the development of the story led by Sid. However, if the story is filled with too many settings, it would be difficult for the story to move forward. So I have the impression that Mr. Aizawa created the characters with a certain amount of blank spaces so that the story can move forward in an interesting direction at that moment. Next, we need to talk about the illustrations coming from Tozai's, who's the same person that draws 80K Gold. Daisuke Aizawa and the editor Shimizu agreed that Tozai could expand the world. One of the reasons why he was picked and highly sought after was his use of colors, which is a standout in the show, but he was also adept at creating original character designs. We have him to thank for all the character designs in the show. These three worked to create consistent original characters. Editor Shimizu says he wanted to bring out each one's different charms because we all have our own favorite characters that are not the main leads in the shows that we like. So it was time for Kadokawa Shoten to put the anime in the hands of the animators, and instead of hiring the more well-known studios that were available such as Madhouse, Bones, Silverlink, Geek Toys, or Wit Studio, it was scheduled to be made by a small studio named Nexus. Nexus is usually the studio that would do co-studio working alongside a bigger studio, such as Silverlink. In the past, they would do second key animations or in-between animations to help, but now they were solely in charge of the success of the show. Now, looking at this building, you wouldn't guess that this was the company behind Eminence and Shadow, but the studio in the past has animated fan-favorite shows such as Chivalry of a Failed Knight, Comic Girls, and Darwin Games, but it didn't help that the studio didn't get together often to work on shows, with them having a very small track record. True, the show did show some promise, but it couldn't demand more attention like a AAA anime series, and from the looks of it, it looked like a regular seasonal anime that would make back its money 7 years later. But that all changed after this scene. From this point on, it was all hands on deck, with them adding an additional 12 animation studios to help produce it. Normally, animes would have maybe 1 or 2 additional studios when taking on an anime, with them being relegated to what I said earlier, second key animations or in-betweens, and sometimes they'd also do a full episode. For example, Studio Nexus already had Art-Based BAM and Rising Force to help them, but moving forward they had Studio Angle, B-Loop, Geek Toys, NKZA, Production Good Book, Rick, Segasha, Shadow Media, Studio Bambino, and Studio Gamblin. The most notable studio here being Geek Toys, like I said earlier. Even if the studios might not be known, these are still young professionals who are looking to make a good impression. After the key animations are finished, the sound director does a casting call for all available voice actors, with this person being in control of all sound. I'm assuming they were given 6 months ahead of time to pick the cast. Yamashita Soichiro is the voice actor for Sid, and he actually gave a notable interview about his time there, with him loving the depth of the character. In the first episode, he was roughly confused, because he believed he was working on an isekai, and then he saw him die, and then be revived again as Shadow. And as they're showing Shadow, Moonlight Sonata is playing, with him loving that scene. Then later on in the show, as Shadow Garden is being known throughout the city, there's a scene with Rose, as Shadow is playing the piano, with that same song being Moonlight Sonata, with this being a callback not only to Sid when he was first being transformed into Shadow, but also a callback for Rose as she's now joining Shadow Garden, serving a double meaning. Yamashita was asked about his character and the challenges of playing both. Yamashita says that it's complicated to be Shadow and Sid, but I was conscious of the fact that he is a strange but honest child at heart without thinking too much. He's not purely calculated, but is only motivated by his curiosity. By feeling that, I knew it would be fun to do this, or it'd be cool to do this. But the character isn't ego-driven, is what he says. In some ways, he's pure. I was conscious of that the entire point, where Sid never wavers. The director also directed me to joke around more, so I was able to do so quite freely. When doing the script, it's not so strict as you think, with the voice actor actually being able to change lines to best suit their voice, since they know what words go best with his voice. As long as the core theme isn't being changed, it's all good. I think people misunderstand this show, with people thinking it's a parody of isekai, with it actually being a twist on Chunibyo. The voice actor behind Beta was asked about her audition. Minasanori says, "I took part in Beta's audition. At the time, I could sense from the dialogue that Beta is the character who is fascinated with the main character, being Sid, or Shadow. I also got the impression that in Seven Shadows, she's not only powerful but intelligent. However, when I opened the lid, that being the script, I was quite unexpected that it was a huge gag. The more the main character tried to be cool, the more it became a joke. And I thought it was beautiful with their twist on Chunibyo to this extent. From the script alone, it was difficult to tell whether the story was serious or a gag, and I often found out during the post-recording that it was a gag. She lastly talks about the veteran Hayami Sho, with him setting the tone as the first villain, which might seem like a small role, but it's important to set the expectations of the cast very early on, so they know how to perform in the future when it's time to get serious, because they're joking around most of the time. A lot of the other characters did give some interviews, but I might save that for a part 2 of this video. You guys let me know down in the comment section. For animation, he basically left it all up to the animators. Being too hands-off could be dangerous for the final product, but what helped was the director was a big fan of the source material. He was told in the last interview series that director Nakanishi said that he read The Eminence in Shadow about 5 episodes into the web novel series and was convinced he had to be the one to work on this anime. And when the creator heard this, he was honored that he knew his anime was in good hands. There is a huge trend going on here. Everyone a part of writing, editing, illustrations, key animations, screenwriting, voice acting. Once they read this work, they instantly knew they had to be the ones a part of this show, no matter what. They obsessed about the project, and they didn't sleep until they knew they gave the best they could do. This isn't about a paycheck. This is extremely hard to ever get in any business setting. In the creation of this channel, I review and do researching on animes, and this level of dedication is hard to come by. I know there's like a stigma how like Japanese people are some of the most hardworking people around, and yeah, sure, but still, I don't see this level of dedication from other animes. These people behind the show are the reason why it has a level of top quality around it, even if it wasn't given to the people we would necessarily associate that quality with. Reception. How well received was the show? Well, it was almost instantly the #1 show in Japan. This is reported by most charts. Like Japan's version of YouTube, it was #1 on Nico Video, just in front of the #2 DG chart, #3 Yoamishi Pedal Limit Break, #4 Spy Classroom, which is why I got a second season. It was also ranked the 2nd most popular isekai of that year behind Overlord on Damara, ranking as high as #4 on Netflix Japan, and it was consistently #3 on Amazon Prime. Also, if you had High Dive when it aired, it crashed the site multiple times, and it later got onto Disney+. So streaming wise, it did phenomenal. By October 2022, the series accumulated a total of 2 million copies in circulation, over 3.5 million copies in circulation by December of that same year, and over 4 million copies in circulation by the next year of February 2023. The first Blu-ray volume sold 2,327 copies in its first week debut. The second volume sold 2,499 copies in its first week, but it's currently at 3,157, with that being reported really last year, with it set to release more later on, April 26, 2023, with Blu-rays and DVDs not being a priority, but rising every month. On the low end, it's on pace to selling 12,628, projecting 1,692,152 yen. It's only growing from here, with us not having official numbers at the moment. Then of course it has a very popular mobile game that's on Crunchyroll, which took around 2,000 to 50,000 to make it, with it possibly returning anywhere from 500,000 and up, which is one of the big sources animes are making their money right now, next to the light novel and the manga sales, with it also having a spin-off series. What makes it good? The show has a lot of things going for itself. Design, animation, sound, interesting dialogue, no filler, solid side characters, character philosophy. My problem with watching the show is how I was comparing it to Overlord, because this is the 2.0 version of a dark isekai, to little things where in the outro, instead of having these badass song covers with illustrations of the light novel, we get a puzzle game of naked girls. I had to remind myself that this isn't Overlord and how that could be the best thing possible for this show. I had to remind myself of the differences, how in this show the girls can actually grow outside of Sid eventually, where in Overlord that could never happen, where Ainz wants them to grow, yet Sid hopes that they don't leave him, but ultimately doesn't care. I can more respect the person saying they dislike the show because of the slow pacing, the storyline, not enjoying the comedy, thinking it's the main part of the show, saying he's too OP even though Alpha is doing all the work, how they dislike the use of the shadows, how they can only recognize Alpha and Beta being real characters but the rest of them don't get enough attention, even though that's part of the design of the show to where we're only going to know what we need to know when we need to know it. Another problem with the show is the harem aspect of the show, with people simply stating this and then feeling it's enough of a statement to dislike it. People who use this for a problem have to remember that Sid is an aromantic character, like Uncle Oji-san, cause there is almost no way to turn this man on. A completely naked princess that is fully interested in him is in the hot springs with him, but she's the one staring at him. He has no interest in the woman around him. If anything, I would say that's just eye candy for the generic isekai watchers. Like I said, really good reasons to say you dislike the show. Storyline, pacing, villains, cringing is a good reason. There's more people who like the show than dislike the show, with the people who generally dislike the show being like 5% of the people who watched it, so get ratioed, bitch. Honestly, looking up this anime was fun, and I could see myself making a second part talking about the anime and its creation, maybe individual characters. So make sure to like the video if you haven't already, and sub to the channel if you found this entertaining. I make videos about random anime.